You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist.
Hi everyone, it's Paige Smathers. Thanks so much for being here. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at positive-nutrition.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever podcast app you use to listen to this podcast. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast. My name is Paige, and I'm stoked to share this podcast with you. I mean, I always am. Each week is a lot of fun for me. This one in particular feels like an important conversation. So I recorded this episode with Monica a week or so prior to me releasing it. And for my dietitian listeners out there, you might be aware that there's kind of some stuff being talked about in the dietitian community right now, sort of some big conversations, some messy, complicated, difficult conversations happening around philosophy and communication and messaging. And it's interesting, as I was editing this podcast episode, I realized how very relevant this particular episode is for this exact week. So I'm excited to be releasing it. I hope it gives us all stuff to think about. Like I always say, food for thought. And Monica did such a good job of sort of explaining where she took through this journey from being kind of really into the science-y space when it came to health and nutrition, and kind of why she made some shifts in her approach and kind of why she landed where she is professionally right now. So Monica is such a wonderful person to have this conversation with about guiding principles and values and messaging. That's really what she does for work right now. So she explains this in the podcast episode, but Monica is a brand and media strategist, and she also is a business coach for dietitians, therapists, people in the wellness space. So we talk a lot about kind of her personal journey. We talk about some guiding principles that she is really excited about for her personally, how that has helped her with health and happiness. And then we also spend a lot of time talking about our messaging as health professionals in the wellness space, and why sometimes things can feel divisive and maybe what we can do differently. So I think this is a really important conversation, especially given some of the kind of current things going on in the dietitian world. And if you're a lay listener, don't worry about it. You know, it's all going to be fine. We're just having tough conversations. And yeah, it's not really the most important thing in the world, I think, for people who aren't dietitians to be super caught up in what's going on here. But anyway, I'm really excited to share this podcast with you. Monica is lovely, as are each of you listening. I also wanted to just take a minute to just say that I need to be sort of really transparent and honest here. So it's September. I'm editing this and recording this on September 17th. And right now, here today, and I reserve the right to change my mind, but I am feeling very tired. I'm feeling very exhausted and kind of just spent. So I'm looking at my professional life. I'm looking at how I spend my time, and I'm kind of looking at how I might be able to be really skillful in how I use my time and energy, because it's really precious to me. So I am planning right now today, I'm planning to take 2 months off from podcasting. So I want to release a weekly episode like I've done faithfully for literally years. I want to do that through the end of October, and then I am going to take November and December off. I don't know what that means for the podcast. I don't really know if that means that I'm going to come back with a bang. I don't know if that means I'm going to come back and do less. I don't know if that means that I'm going to decide that I want to be done. So just a little insight into me. I do this because podcasts have helped me so much in my life. I wanted to give back. And it was naive to do that because I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. But while this is incredibly rewarding and so fulfilling in a million ways, it's also really against my nature to be a really public person. I don't really like getting random emails from people who Google my name and tell me how much they hate the podcast. It's just like, it's just hard. And I get that like on a daily basis. So I'm just kind of reevaluating. I am kind of trying to stay unattached to the way I'm doing things right now. And I'm trying to kind of navigate this in a way that feels good. And I don't really know what that is right now. So I just want to let you guys know that's where I'm at. I'm planning on continuing to release episodes through October, and then I am going to take a little break. So yeah, that's where I am. And, having a podcast is not a lucrative business. I spend a lot of hours every week doing this, and I do it because I sincerely want to be helpful. There's also side benefits of having a pretty big audience where I'm able to kind of share with you what I'm up to and occasionally have people purchase things, which kind of comes back to me in an indirect way as this podcast kind of being a part of how I make money. But I don't really make money from this. I do it all myself. And it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of incredible positive things. It's also a lot of negative things. So I hope you'll bear with me as I share, stuff that I'm offering, things that's going on. That helps me feel like it's worth it, and it helps me kind of get the word out there about what I'm up to. And I encourage you to check those things out if they might be a good fit for you, if they might fulfill a need. So right now, the thing I'm most excited to share with all of you is this new course that I built called Positive Nutrition 101. And what I'm so excited about this is this really occupies this nuanced space where, yes, diet culture is tearing us down. And yeah, we want to reject that. But at the same time, maybe we want to learn about nutrition to help kind of demystify some myths and to help us stay true to what's right for us and to help us sort of have a good scientific foundation to be able to navigate diet culture. So I'm super excited about this. Not a lot of people are talking about nutrition in conjunction with intuitive eating. And I really think that there's a lot of value that we can get by exploring the science and being comfortable with that as a basis and as a foundation. So check that course out. It's called Positive Nutrition 101. You can find it on my website, positive-nutrition.com, and then click on the Academy tab. That'll take you right there. You can check it out. It's on sale for $250. It's 12 lessons. It's about 10 to 12 hours of information. And I co-teach it with Jessie Hoffman, who is months away from getting her PhD in nutritional sciences and about to become a registered dietitian as well. So we are really proud of that. We're really excited to share that with you. And then as always, if you want to continue the conversation outside of the podcast, you can join us over on Facebook at Nutrition Matters Podcast Community there. And I think that's about it. Always, feel free to leave a review. Feel free to donate to the podcast if you feel so inclined or if you have the means. All of that is very helpful to sort of, help me continue going forward and to help cover the costs of podcasting because it isn't free. Obviously, I spend a lot of time, but then I also pay to host the podcast and all kinds of things. So anyway, that is a very, very, very long intro, but I wanted to be honest with all of you, kind of share where I am energy-wise, emotionally, and just kind of put that out there. Sometimes you need to speak it and see how you feel. So that's kind of what I'm doing. All right. Well, with that, please feel free to just sit back and relax and enjoy this episode with Monica. She is just a phenomenal human, and as are all of you. And I'm super, super grateful to have the chance to um, communicate with you each week. It is really an honor. I feel very, very privileged to be able to do that. And I thank each and every one of you for the love and support you extend my way. It means a ton. And enjoy. Monica, welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast, and thanks so much for being here. I'm stoked to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Paige. I mean, I know we talked about doing this back in April, so it's so great to finally be here after after a few months.
I know it always takes me a while to schedule people because, yeah, I'm always like, okay, 3 months from now, let's get you on the calendar. It's funny.
Yeah, it's super. I mean, it's always interesting to like see how much content you can build up over time.
Yeah, I know. It's cool. I mean, this is episode 133, Monica. So
that's a lot.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of conversations.
I know. And I have learned so much from each and every one of them. And I'm excited to learn from you today. So let's dive into a little bit about who you are and what you do, just kind of on a broad level. Share a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into kind of the topic at hand for today.
Yeah, sure. So I am the founder of WellSeek. So what I do there is I'm a brand and media strategist and also a business coach for health professionals. And we really focus on helping health experts stand out with purpose as that trusted expert and really rise above that noise that we really often associate with the health and wellness industry. So one of the biggest struggles that I see from a lot of health experts is that they want to help more people, but when it comes to actually communicating with the people they want to reach, they just don't know really where to start. And, they don't know how to stand out with their message. And they're seeing how these other influencers and individuals around them who might not be as qualified as them, they're able to rally these large followings and audiences around them. And what's often missing in their message is that, they're focused more on having these right facts and expertise, but really it's more about having a better understanding of the emotional and motivational triggers and needs of their audience and how to play to that. So I really strive to help the people I work with understand that we are at our core human beings who want to connect and relate with the other person that we're trying to help, and that's really the core around the work that we help experts uncover that authentic and humanized aspect of their message so they can make that bigger impact on the people around them and ultimately their business.
That's so interesting, that human side. It doesn't matter how smart you are or how many facts you know, if people think of you or perceive you as someone who's just this robotic fact dictionary, like they're maybe not as willing to listen to you as someone who feels more human. I think that's so true. I've gotten a lot of feedback about that myself with stuff I put out there. Just an appreciation of like, oh, you seem like a real person,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We are looking for other people to relate to, right? Not just having a bunch of facts thrown at us. There was a study once that was published in Harvard Business Review, and they talked about how 95% of our emotions, or sorry, 95% of our decisions are actually driven by our emotions, not logical facts. And it's really about how we feel about a decision before we make them, and then we'll follow it up with the logic that backs it up. So it's pretty interesting, how we are as humans, because we really are just emotionally driven.
It makes sense to me that that emotions and feelings are the bigger driver of our behaviors. And I think recognizing that helps you understand why it's so important to talk about our feelings, and like why maybe on this podcast and why in the work you do, in the work I do beyond the podcast, why we're talking so much about feelings and all of that, because of how much that affects how we act and our behaviors and ultimately our health, our happiness, all of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, right?
Sure. I mean, it's probably why I do focus around that so much, around our business when we are in the business of health and helping people connect with health, healthier behaviors, whatever that is to them. We have to talk about the emotions.
Yeah, and ultimately, I really love the idea of kind of boiling down evolutionary psychology, and I know that this is way oversimplifying, but I think human beings have evolved to want to feel good. So that's an important thing to recognize in ourselves, and also maybe as professionals to recognize, like, in our messaging, that's an important thing to keep in mind, don't you think?
I know. I love what you just said. That it actually boils it down perfectly. I mean, yes, there's so many of these like innate needs that we have. Like we have an innate need for finding community. We have an innate need to, feel like we learn something new. But all of them, like you said, it boils down to just feeling good. I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I love it. So, talk about kind of, just give me sort of a background. We're going to be talking today a little bit about your history, what, like, your journey with health, and obviously like your science background. Let's talk kind of quickly about what brought you into this space, and I'll kind of direct you if I have questions, but kind of talk about how you got into this space of helping professionals do what you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, it definitely didn't start off this way. I fell into this from a very different background. I was actually a biotech scientist. I got my PhD in bioengineering, so totally not related to what I do now. Um, I just felt so far upstream from directly helping others in their health when I was working in that early stage R&D process in biotech. So I really irresponsibly just decided, okay, I want to start a company that helps people seek their wellness. And I literally had that idea in my head, and I came up with the name WellSeek, and that's how it all started. And from there, you learn a lot about how the health industry works and all the people involved and all of that. But really, through that process in the last 4.5 years, I realized that if I wanted to reach more people and help them, I need to help more health professionals better connect and reach more of the people they can directly help. So that's really how it all came together.
So yeah, so just to paint the picture, you work a lot with dietitians. Do you work with other health professionals too?
Yes, so I've worked also with like mental health professionals, therapists,
Okay.
fitness individuals too. So yeah, it kind of kind of covers the spectrum of health and wellness. But I will say the majority of the people I work with are in nutrition.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, you do all this schooling to become a dietitian or to become a therapist, whatever. And, um, and then you're like, oh, I want to help people. I want to start a practice. And then you start putting your message out there, creating a website. You're all of a sudden in this like communications role, plus like entrepreneur, plus accountant, plus website developer, plus marketer, right? So there's like all these hats you have to wear. And it makes total sense to just be like, hey, can you look over this wording? Can you look over my website? Can you help me figure out how to solidify the message I'm trying to put out there? I know for me, it took me many years to even figure out how I want to talk about what I even do. And I know that's always evolving for me, even in the current moment.
Well, that's one of the nicest things about, developing your message and your brand, essentially, which is exactly what you talked about. Your brand is ever evolving. It's never static because it is literally a reflection of you, who you are personally and professionally. And we're all on this journey. We're all going to change based on the new things that we learn. So the fact that you are, constantly changing means you're evolving. And that's actually a great thing.
Well, that's awesome. And it's so good to have that background. So to kind of summarize, you were really, really hardcore into the science, got your PhD in, what was it,
Bioengineering.
Bioengineering. That's hardcore. And then I know, like, because I know you, talk a little bit about the part of your story where you started to kind of be like, wait, I am learning about this more emotional side of health from a personal level. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So just kind of thinking back to, when I first started, my initial view of nutrition was very much from that lens of, a data scientist and an engineer, right? I actually worked in this very niche area called metabolic engineering. So basically I built these computational models where we understood how our DNA and nutrition and metabolism all interacted to give rise to these different outcomes. So as an engineer and a scientist, accuracy and precision, that was really the goal, right, of using these models, to be able to apply that to basically controlling our health and understanding how to develop therapies around it. But when I look back and I think about the research I did through this computational modeling, there was so much gray. It wasn't precise. Actually, when I think back, like mathematically, it shows that there is actually no precise solution to what healthy actually means. It's actually a range of possible solutions that indicates, kind of multiple paths that we can take to still be in a healthy state. So that was actually, when I think back to that, it's almost like where my understanding of health now, where it is much more, it's not so black and white, and it really fit with what I knew back then. And the other one was that I understood, from a mathematical standpoint, the fundamental principle is that you have to nourish your body with all of the essential nutrients that your body can't make. And you have to maintain this balance of like fats, proteins, and carbs, right, required to sustain your cells. And too much or too little of anything, there was actually this energy and mass imbalance with your cells. And that actually leads towards cellular dysfunction. So sorry, I kind of got a little more sciencey there, but
love it. Get as sciencey as you want. I love it.
But that's exactly what you can calculate from these models. And the irony is that this was all happening as I was developing a career in science. I was getting to study, DNA and metabolism to kind of these deeper levels. But despite knowing all of it, I was totally brainwashed with this mindset that in order for me to be healthy, I was actually supposed to restrict my diet and control myself to be at a certain size. Even though I was, at my job, like I was calculating the rationale behind why we're actually supposed to nourish ourselves and keep things balanced. And I wasn't doing that, which was crazy. And I think that was really where I understood or realized that there was this disconnect between my book knowledge and how I was actually living for myself. And my health. And, for someone who's reasonably well-versed in that science world, I was so disillusioned with what diet and health actually meant. I mean, no wonder everyone else who might not be as, like other consumers, they might not understand this. They're in trouble. So that's really kind of how I started doing more of the work that I'm doing now.
Oh, I love that. Oh, thanks for getting sciencey. I love it. So, okay. So you kind of, is this a fair way to describe it? You kind of were really intensely into the science world. Then you started to kind of become disillusioned with it due to even the science started to kind of make you disillusioned just because it felt like it was trying to be so precise and accurate, but you were seeing flaws even in the premise of assuming something so complex
Yep,
and sophisticated.
exactly. As I dove more into the work that I was doing at WellSeek, so I mean, when I first started, I actually thought I was going to build like a nutrition app. Like, who else needs a tracker, right? Like that's what I knew. That's what I thought, that's what everyone needed, a more accurate tracker.
I know, I'll make another calorie counting app. That sounds like a good solution.
Exactly. But, my views really started to change when I really started to understand the emotional drivers and the motivational complexities around our choices. Obviously we're human beings, and as we first started talking about at the very beginning, it's our emotions that drive our decisions, and it's very different being a human making a decision than working in like a cell culture lab and changing up parameters in a computer model where you can actually control that environment. In real life, it's not. Right? It's about the type of relationship that we have with ourselves, our food, how we feel about it before we actually make the decision to consume it. And what we are exposed to in our culture is far more powerful of a driver than just having a logical understanding of the facts.
Yes, so true. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine when I see dietitians say, it's all about education. You just need to get educated. And I'm just like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Like, there's certain times where education obviously can be really important and helpful and help connect the dots. But
I don't think it's all about education. Otherwise, nobody would need me or other people who do similar things. Like there is this whole other side of how and why we make choices, which you mentioned that number of like 95% of it comes from that emotional space. That's super, super important to understand, in the realm of trying to help people, take good care of themselves.
Yep, absolutely. And it also pertains to the people that someone might reach out for help with. They have to be able to know that, someone, the other person on the other end, the expert, will actually motivate them to do the things that they do need to do to get to a point where they are happier and healthier.
Yeah. Yep. So you talk a little bit about, in an article I read, you talked a little bit about where your personal journey, your personal and professional, and as that intersected, kind of where that brought you down. Like if you could boil that journey down, it brought you to a couple principles. We could also call them values.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share a little bit about how you came up with these three and what they mean to you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So, during that process of understanding how much, our exposure to what's around us actually drives us to what we do, I really started to, I'm obviously working with health professionals and understanding how much media and culture really drives that confusion behind our public's confusion, and it really overshadows kind of those basic principles of healthy living. Um, and and that really inspired me wanting to boil it down to kind of these fundamental principles of living that keep our mind and body happy and healthy. So I ended up sharing this in a Thrive Global article. And Arianna Huffington was kind enough to actually share it out on our personal social media, which was amazing to see that traction. And really it boiled it down to three areas, which is balance, compassion, and gratitude. So for me, and I think when we kind of talked about my realization of my knowledge and my actions not really being congruent to that whole idea of balance, right? From food to exercise, and even in the way we might pour ourselves into the work we do. It's that understanding that when you obsessively go all in one area of your life, it's naturally going to take away from another. That extreme goal setting, I think that our society perpetuates. It's not conducive for us to keep life in perspective, and it does impact the way we live when it comes to like how we are being present with our family and friends and doing other things that make life worth living. So those goals, right, that you set for yourself, which is great. It's always a good idea to set goals to keep moving forward in life, but when they're so extreme, they're no longer helping us to get that far, right? From wanting to live that more fulfilling life. The second, of course, being compassion. I think with diet culture, it puts us on this quest for good health that eventually becomes more of this mental game of self-sabotage. And that is ironically when health is actually not even a focus. And it wasn't until I actually had my own kids. So I have two kids, they're 8 and 5. But going through that process of giving birth and that's really when I started to appreciate my body for what it was, and being able to, physically endure the discomfort. I'm just going to call it discomfort of giving birth
nice way of saying
and creating life. It was just and that's really where I started to respect my body for what it was, not for something that I needed to manipulate. And that's really when that compassion and kindness followed, because if we're not kind to ourselves, I mean, our world's pretty I don't know, there's a lot of hate out there. We can't even be kind to ourselves. Like, goodness, we might as well start with ourselves first. So that's really where that second principle came to.
Okay. And then before we jump into the last one, let's just dive into compassion a little bit. Sometimes people think that being compassionate with yourself means that you just don't ever change, and you're just always making excuses for yourself, and you'll never move forward because you're just like rainbows and butterflies all day long. I can see where people are coming from when they might feel that way or might be kind of weirded out by the word compassion. But I think it's worth diving into because I think there's some myths to dispel here. So there was a 2016 systematic review of 28 studies done by Braun, Park, and Gorin, and it concluded that self-compassion was actually continually linked to lower levels of eating pathology and was implicated as a protective factor against poor body image and eating pathology. So, so I understand the hangups some people might have with self-compassion, and it might feel really unnatural and it might be kind of scary. But, from a personal perspective, I can vouch for what this study is saying. From a professional perspective, I've seen people make so many strides in their own relationship with food with more self-compassion. And I really think that this is just a really important thing when we're talking about a conversation about how we can be healthy and happy. I think self-compassion is like paramount. It's such a big deal, and it's worth practicing. It's worth working on. I really think that self-compassion is actually the antidote to shame, and shame is where so much of our unhealthy behaviors, patterns, thought process, whatever it might be, stem from. So what's your reaction to all of that I just blabbed on about?
No, I mean, everything you quote unquote blabbed was perfect. Like it definitely, I mean, just from my own personal experiences, I know that, I had these ideas around what I needed to achieve in order to be perfect, right? I think there's this epidemic right now. I'm trying to remember. There was also a study around. There's this epidemic of perfectionism that many millennials and even just people a little bit older are experiencing. That there's always these moments of feelings of perceived inadequacy, that we're not enough, and the environment that we are living in kind of provokes that. It makes you feel like, oh, well, are you enough? There's more that you can do. And when you feel that shame, and unless you have that understanding that that you are enough, that these are all external factors that they can have meaning in your life, but do you want to allow it to dictate the self-talk that you have inside? That's the difference. And I think what you just said there was perfect. You have to have that compassion for yourself and just be kind to yourself when you do feel inadequate.
Yeah, because you will, right? That's a feeling that, is going to come up because of the world we live in, plus it's just natural, right? To feel that way. But what are you going to do with that? Are you going to tell yourself the story that means that you are not enough and that you're terrible and that you can never, do anything right and blah, 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 on and on? Or are you going to be like, oh, I know what that thought is. I recognize that thought. That comes up a lot for me. And it's okay to feel that way, but I know that I won't feel this way forever. And I need to just allow myself to feel it and then move on, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, I think it's totally fine to want to strive for things in life. I mean, otherwise, what's going to move us forward? But it's just also understanding that, it's a process, it's a journey, and it's not the destination that we don't reach. It's more about understanding what have we learned in the process, so that the next step we take, we are one step closer to whatever you are trying to reach, and being okay with that, rather than thinking to yourself, gosh, I'm such a failure. Right. I didn't do that.
What does that do for you? I mean, I really love acceptance and commitment therapy. A lot of people listening will know that. And mindfulness really just jives with the way my brain works. So in acceptance and commitment therapy, we're less interested in what's true, and we're more interested in what's helpful. So for me, that is such a helpful lens or kind of filter to have on the thoughts that are coming in. Like, okay, yeah, it might be true that I just failed at this thing I attempted, or it might be true that I'm really angry or having a terrible day or feeling super jealous or whatever it is. But what's helpful for me is probably not to continue to call myself a failure. What's helpful for me is probably to say, yeah, I failed at that. What can I learn from it? Right. And I know that sounds cliche, but really, like, just asking yourself, all right, what's true? I can think about that, but maybe there's this other question of what's helpful. And to me, that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, as you were saying that, what came up for me too was just this idea of compassion and acceptance means that you're staying stagnant. And it's not. It's actually a tool for you to move forward. By accepting your present moment as something that has happened, you are actually able to move forward because of that, rather than wallowing in that negativity and thinking that, well, it didn't happen because I am this way. That's when you become more fixed in your beliefs. So I love what you just said there.
Well, thank you. So anything else you want to say about compassion? And if not, I want to move back to that first value you were talking about.
Balance.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Okay. And I meant to kind of jump in there, but then I didn't, and then it was too late. So let's go back to it. Let's go back to it and talk about, sometimes when people hear, like, sometimes my clients will tell me when they hear the word balance, it just kind of makes them kind of tense up, because it can kind of feel like, sort of like, I have no idea what balance is. I'm either over here on one end or on here on the other end. I don't even know what balance looks like. And or people might think that the word balance is just kind of code word for, like, just learn the exact right way to eat and then you'll be healthy, right? So what are your reactions to that when I talk about kind of people's reactions to the word balance?
Well, I think it has more of a sense of people are trying to find a sense of identity. So they want to find something that they are kind of all in with, versus kind of feeling like they have to, mediate between all these different buckets, because, life is complex. You're just kind of like, I just want to know what I need to do. I am this and that's it. So I think the idea of balance means, oh my gosh, there's more things I'm supposed to be able to mediate or juggle. And that can be, it's like you're trying to program manage your life. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like, is that something that some of your clients are scared of because they think it means they have more things that they have to think about?
Yeah, I think so. I think what you're saying is very much what I hear very often of, like, what does, I don't want to have to think about it. Just tell me what to do. And I think this value of balance is actually something that is a pretty guiding value in my life. I definitely value balance when it comes to food, but I think that extends beyond, like, making sure there's a carbohydrate, a fat, and a protein on your plate, right? Like, I think balance can mean that, but it can also mean sometimes balance with food means that you are really in the mood for pizza and you just say, oh, well, I'm just going to eat pizza for dinner. It doesn't need to be perfectly balanced every time, right?
Yes.
So to me, balance can be the individual, like, meals, but also just the balance of, like, not, like, allowing yourself to not be so rigid. And then obviously balance extends into so many other areas of life for me too, like the classic, like, work-life balance, the classic balancing sort of your approach to people who are different than you, and just saying, like, okay, well, like, I could get really worked up about this, or I could not care at all. Maybe there's a middle ground, or maybe the middle way is worth exploring in so many different aspects of life. And so to me, balance is such an amazing principle and value, but I think people get really tripped up in, like, the nutrition, like the nutrition implications of balance, because they're like, oh, that means that I need to, like, count macros or, like, weigh everything to know what's perfectly balanced. And I think that's a misconception.
Oh, for sure. And something else that also happens is that balance just doesn't sound as, wonderfully like magical, right? You're like,
Yeah,
oh, I knew that. Well, tell me something I didn't know. What's the magic bullet?
that's so true.
Give
I
me
think
that.
that's another
Let's make
element. It's like it's not sexy to be like just yeah, like just be balanced, right?
sure. They're like, oh, it's bland and boring, but
Yeah,
it's the truth.
it is. But you know what? Balance also has some cool aspects to it. So, a lot of people when they try to eat, quote, healthy, they will be like, okay, so eating healthy means I'm eating chicken and broccoli for dinner. And sometimes balance means adding carbohydrate, sometimes balance means, okay, eat some rice with that at least, or some chicken, or I mean, or some pasta or a piece of bread or something, right? But
Mhm.
then sometimes balance means, hey, like, could you grab a handful of carrots and eat that with your meal? So
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily need to um, elicit, I mean, it can elicit whatever reaction it does in you, but I think just opening your mind to like this idea of balance and the implications it has with nutrition, it can be really powerful. And it doesn't always necessarily mean like just add vegetables, So
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
anything else you want to say about this word balance, or anything like from your personal perspective of how balance has been helpful for you? Or
Well, I think for me, I've always kind of been a more extreme type of person, so I need to constantly remind myself about balance. And when I say extreme, I tend to become very passionate about things that I love to do. I remember, I mean, as an example, I during my grad school days, I got very into Ashtanga yoga. Are you familiar with it?
yeah.
Okay, so Ashtanga is that very kind of gymnastic-y, very there's a lot of stuff going on there with that. And I started doing yoga for the mindfulness meditative reasons, but then I found myself being more obsessed with just trying to get into the moves, being very flexible, and I injured myself so much doing that. And it's not to say Ashtanga yoga is going to cause that. It was my mindset and forcing myself into things that I wasn't ready for that was eliciting these more negative responses in my body. But if I had just kept a more balanced and adaptive mindset, I would have told myself, okay, ease into it. Don't force it. It's okay. So I kind of think about, balance in that respect, not going to the extreme
Well,
when,
adaptive is such a cool word that you used that I
yeah,
think has a lot of really interesting implications with it.
yeah. So yeah, maybe adaptation and balance, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. Right. Like adapting to the context of your situation, being wise enough to be able to say, okay, this situation, this is what balance looks like. This
Yes.
other situation, that's what balance look like. And maybe it looks totally different in two different contexts. But yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just what you just said. It's different in every context. It's the nuance that matters, right?
Yes, I think so. Awesome. Well, let's talk about this last principle that you outlined as kind of what you've come to as being an important part of the picture, the equation of health and happiness.
Yeah, so this last one, which is gratitude, I think really stems from the compassion, right? Once I had a better understanding about having that better dialogue with myself, being more kind and compassionate with myself, I just started seeing my body in a different way, and that's really when I became more grateful for what I have. It was really just starting to appreciate my body as this physical framework that enables me to do the things I enjoy in life. And that's really where I started understanding that health actually had less to do with these numbers and the facts that it's really more of a reflection of how you accept yourself and the life that you've been gifted with. And the fact is, we only have this one body in life. we have to appreciate it for all that it is every day that we are in actual, when we are in good health, because at the end of the day, this is all we have. And we need to reflect that in the way we care for ourselves every day that we have here on this earth.
Oh, love it. Loved everything you've just said. I want to add a few things. I've been thinking about gratitude quite a bit. And I think for me, what I'm really excited about right now is the idea of gratitude when it arises in me naturally, that feels better to me than when I force gratitude. And so what I mean by that is I've noticed that when I move through the world with certain mindsets, I just feel blown away by just how incredible like my body is, this life is, like other human beings are. Like, does that make sense? Like, it's overwhelming how amazing existence is when I sort of view the world through a certain lens. And I'll share what that is. But I also want to mention that I'm not saying that this is the right way to feel gratitude, because obviously we can get into trouble when we get really dogmatic and rigid about anything. But I think you can use gratitude as, you can approach it indirectly or you can approach it directly. And I think either way you see really great benefits. So you could kind of force yourself to sit down at the end of each day and say, here are 3 things I'm grateful for. I had a crappy day, but at least I had these 3 things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has its own value for sure. But for me, I'm really excited about this thing that I'm noticing in myself, that when I honestly, and I'm sorry, I'm always talking about mindfulness on the podcast, but when I practice this mindfulness, looking at the world through these lenses of interdependence and impermanence, when I recognize that like literally everything is connected, and I wouldn't exist if the sun didn't exist, and like other people didn't exist, and all these other things that aren't me are the things that make me me. And therefore I'm so grateful for all of that, right? And then this other lens of impermanence, where you recognize like, gosh, right now is fleeting, or this feeling I'm having right now, if it's happiness, like I know it won't be around forever. So I need to really be here and be present and appreciate and feel grateful for where I am right now and the time I have right now. So there's so much I could say about both of those things, but I just wanted to mention that I have just seen such an increase in a feeling of gratitude naturally arising from me, because I'm really working on like looking at the world through these lenses of interdependence and impermanence. And I think for me, it really jives with the way my brain works, and it just makes so much sense. What are you thinking though, Monica?
Well, first of all, Paige, that was just incredibly, incredibly profound, like what you just said. Like you gave me like goosebumps. I love that. Being able to experience gratitude in the moment, it's hard. I think I don't know, it's a human nature that we kind of tend to see what isn't great about our lives, that we naturally fall into that habit, that we almost have to like force ourselves into, something like journaling, which again, like what you said, it can work because it does, help you create a new habit where you do have to think about these things. But something that has worked for you is to start looking at these moments and again, it's the context, right? It's like it's not just about saying, oh, I'm grateful for this day or for, X, Y, and Z. It's really the intention behind the gratitude. And also understanding that, yes, our lives are very, that we're really small in this world, right? So we're almost kind of insignificant. And the fact that we are here is great. But then at the same time, it is so significant. I don't know if that even made any sense.
No, it totally does. Like it's everything. Like we're both insignificant, but then we're everything too, right? Like I think this is adulthood, where you have to hold like 2 opposing truths at the same time in each of your hands and just be like, yep, this is true, that I'm absolutely insignificant, but this other thing is also true, that I am everything. And you hold that at the same time and you just say, well, there you go. That's nuance, right? Like Like, yeah, there's two opposing truths, and sometimes that's just how it goes.
Yeah, and it goes back to balance, right? Being able to adapt
Mm,
and mediate in
love that.
between. Yeah, you're like you said, you have there's just it's never just one, right? There's going to be these opposing forces in your life, and being able to move between the two seamlessly, that's how that's what maybe we should strive for, versus saying I am just this way.
Oh, yeah. The minute you say that, you kind of ruin it because you put a label on it, which then makes you have ideas about what that means, which then makes you fall short of it. Like it's just, yeah, this stuff is really cool to think about and to work on and practice.
I love that. You are
Yay.
a mindfulness guru.
Oh, no. Definitely not, but I love it and I use it all the time with my clients in session. I work on it in my own kind of way, and I'll just mention, like, it's not super formal, right? I'm not like oming in my room for 45 minutes in the morning or something, like
I
anyway.
cannot sit still, by the way, to meditate for that long,
Oh, it's
ever.
so hard. And it's like, then you start saying, like, wow, that's so interesting that it's so hard for me to sit here. Like, what is that about, right? Why is it so hard? What am I so uncomfortable about being still? Anyway, it's so interesting. So, okay, Monica, let's talk about this question that I think will bring a lot of really interesting insight. As someone who has a lot of formal scientific training, and then where you are in this space where you're helping, you know, professionals who practice fitness or nutrition or mental health, that type of world, you're in this wellness space. What do you wish people knew? If you could kind of sum it up, what do you wish people knew about health and maybe science and nutrition and all that stuff?
Well, it all boils down to the fact that nothing is black and white. And we've been talking about that through this whole conversation. Wellness, health, it's different for everyone. And the fact is, we're all going to find our own definition of it. But the thing is, there's kind of this darker side, right? When we think about people wanting to define things, these differing opinions and views that we see, when we start holding them as these absolute rules and truths and dogma. And, it's a tendency for us, like, our human nature, right? We want to seek out these definitive answers. But what happens is when we start taking on these rules as part of our identity, and anytime those values become challenged, we quickly go into this mode of like, I'm right, you're wrong, what's morality? And that's when things become so divisive, right? And we see that all the time from the diets, there's like keto, there's like Whole30, like what's better? I don't know. And then you even see it starting to form in the community, or, with the non-diet community, right? And it just really emphasizes how divisive our culture can be, because we as humans are always trying to rally around like a common enemy and say this idea of like, you're either with us or against us. But that's, it doesn't need to be that way. If we really just think about the reason that we're all here, we just want to be happy, we want to be healthy. Why argue all the time?
Yeah. Oh, so true. So much to what you just said. So I think that, and I talk about this so much on the podcast, I hope people aren't sick of it, but I think that the answer is messiness, and maybe the answer is stop looking for answers and start asking yourself, why am I asking these questions in the first place? Like what part of me needs to know which diet is the right diet? Like, let's forget the answer to that question. Let's just ask myself, like, why do I feel like I need to know that? What is that about? What part of me needs to feel like there is an answer? I think that's where real answers start to come from, where you're like, okay, you are so fiercely advocating for this, that, or the other thing. And sometimes I'm like less interested in whether or not what they're saying is true. I'm kind of like, oh, I'm so interested in knowing why like, why are they putting that out there? Like, I wonder what part of them needs that. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I think, we see not just in the diet world, we see in all forms of our culture, right? Religion, um, ethnicity, politics, everything in between. There's this human tendency to want to be on the right side. I'm right. That's what people want to say. So that's when we get into the slippery slope of wanting to put a definition on something and say that this is the absolute way that you should do something, and you're shoulding yourself, right? And when you are living in that world where you're constantly thinking you should do certain things, you're not living at all anymore.
Yeah, that's so true. And even with what you just said, I'm so interested to know, like, what part of us as human beings, and I'll include myself in this, like, what part of us feels like we need to be right? Like, why do we feel like that? What is that really about? Is it about being right, or is it about feeling worthy, or is it about being validated, or is it about wanting people to think we're great? Like, if you start to kind of like look at this stuff deeper and deeper and ask yourself more questions, if you can boil it down to like, oh, I need to feel validated, like I want people to validate me, then you can start getting validation in real life ways, right? You can start asking for what you actually need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, everything you just said, like all those questions that you asked, like, do I just want to be validated? I mean, it boils down to that very first value that you came up with at the beginning, which is we just want to feel good. We want to feel good about who we are. And there's so many ways that we seek that out. But what we fail to understand is that we are all different, right? We need to take a step back and recognize we're all still learning in our own unique journeys. This just happens to be what I know now, and it's going to be very different from you.
Yeah. And it's going to be different for you too in 5 years, right? And me too.
Yeah, for sure. There's this one quote that I love, and it's we are the sum total of our experiences, and those same experiences and those yet to come will continue to influence and reshape the person we are.
Yeah.
So it's never, it's not static. And, this actually goes back a lot to the work that I do, when I help professionals develop their brand and remind them, this is not defining you as a person in your business. You're going to evolve, but this is who you are in this time and space. So, but know that you can grow beyond this.
Love it. So this idea of what do you wish people knew about nutrition, science, health, all of that stuff, it sounds like you're saying that you wish people knew that, like, they can look deeper at like what's going on for them. Why are they asking these questions? What is this about? Like, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to hustle for your worthiness by eating certain things or looking a certain way or seeking after diets that really don't hold up to science. You can look at what you need and as sort of like a root cause of why you might be even seeking out the diet in the first place. Does that sound fair to summarize, or what would you add?
No, absolutely. That's for the person who is seeking these out, seeking these different ideas out. Absolutely. And I think, and just having been very integrated within the health professional community, what I would to kind of add on top of that is for them to start seeing that, even when there is a disagreement between, people's ideals and philosophies, if we can have a better understanding of, what their intent is, can we remain more mutually respectful, even if they are different views and opinions? Obviously when there is like true malice behind an intent, like they're straight up lying and manipulating for personal gain. No, I mean, you can't stand for that. But when other people are just trying to learn something new and that might be different from what they've been exposed to previously or have been taught for years. We have to find better ways to show respect, for where they are currently at, and then helping, them, like working together with them to fill any gaps of knowledge. So I think, from what you said, it's really about helping people seek their own personal journey. And for the health professionals who are helping those people get there, you have to work together, because with all this infighting, it's never going to move the health industry forward if there's always that continual, combative, nature of it. We have to find a common reason, which is the fact that we want to help people be healthy and happy, regardless of your philosophy or ideals.
Ah, so true. And from my perspective, here's what I'm thinking as you're saying all that. I'm like, I'm so interested because I know what you're talking about. I see the us versus them, and I do know that that is like the epitome of human nature, right? Mm-hmm. I get that. And I'm not even definitely saying that I'm like perfect at not doing this, but it's a dynamic that I'm aware of, and I'm trying to kind of avoid it because it's so toxic to moving any type of perspective, idea, philosophy, or even health and happiness, right? It's so not productive to move any of that forward. But when I hear and see this type of dynamic go on that I know that you're talking about, I really feel like people could do themselves such a huge favor to really start to ask themselves some questions like, what part of me feels the need to have everyone agree with me? Or what part of me feels the need to call somebody out? And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong or bad to call somebody out, or right. I'm not trying to like say anyone who calls someone out is a bad person, right? But what part of you needs that? And what is that really about? And is it about showing other people how great you are? Or is it really a concern for the people who might be affected by this philosophy? Or what is it? And I think sometimes the dynamic I notice is that it seems to be a lot about like kind of positioning ourselves as better than other people. And I think that the minute you feel like you have the moral purity, it gives you license to do things that aren't very humane.
That is such the truth. Wow. I couldn't agree more. Again, so profound what you just said.
Well, thanks. That's so nice of you. I should keep you on every time so you just feel so good about myself. I'm just kidding.
No, but really, I mean, it is so true. Like, as soon as you put yourself above someone else, then you're right. You're giving yourself permission to do something that might not be very nice. I mean,
well, and something you might never actually normally do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that dynamic in so many different ways, for sure, in like social media world and stuff, but also like I see it in my personal life in various ways. It's just a really interesting dynamic. And again, I think it comes back to that us versus them. It's like, well, we're right, you're wrong. Let us tell you why. And let us like grace you with our presence to inform you and convert you to our way of doing this. And to me, that's just like, a million red flags. Like when people even use the word like, I've converted to intuitive eating, or I am going to give this talk and I'm going to like infiltrate the system with these like certain messages that are non-diet or whatever. I'm just like, I don't know if it's just me, but I just like, it makes my skin crawl, I don't really feel like people need us to infiltrate. I think people need us to be real and authentic and show up and to allow them to like live the life that feels right to them. And
like, when they're ready for it, they will come to you.
And not everybody's ready for this stuff.
Exactly.
And what part of me feels like I need to make everybody ready? That's what I want people to ask themselves.
Yes, no, for sure. You cannot force things down people's throats. Um, and until they are ready for that step. And I think, there, yeah, it's funny to kind of talk about this because I think we try so hard to enforce again these rules, enforce these ideas of morality, and what are we trying to accomplish here? If the main goal is to help people be more happy and healthy, if that's like that ultimate goal, how is that helping? You can't force someone to change their minds about something. You have to do it through little steps
Well,
and
and the
help.
more you try to force them, the more they put up more walls, right?
Exactly. Just like, I mean, just the idea of why dieting doesn't work. You restrict yourself and then you're just going to binge because you restricted yourself. You always go from one end to the other. It's that pendulum.
Yeah. Yeah. It puts people on the defense, and then they're like, well, then I'm shutting this off and I'm not listening and this person's crazy, right?
Yes, totally. It's that, I mean, you're right. It totally puts up that wall of where they just can't even listen because they don't think that you get them first.
Yeah. So Monica, before we close up, I just want to say this because I'm anticipating people listening being like, "Oh my gosh, are they talking about this person or that person, or like are they calling someone out?" And I just want to I just want to address that before anyone wonders. Like, to me, honestly, as we've been talking, I have not had any one person in my mind, and I'm more just talking like a general feeling of like what I see the dieting space kind of put out there, what I see the non-dieting space put out there. It is for me not one person. It's just sort of a general dynamic I notice. So, and I think everybody personally, I think everybody has a role to play, and everybody's needed. Even those more kind of like shout it on the rooftops and just be really, really like firm and intense and like those types of people, I love them. Like, I think that's needed. And I think that serves such an important purpose. I think people who are willing to sort of bridge the gap a little bit for people, and people who, do the one-on-one work, and people who do more the consulting, and, I think everybody has a role to play. And so I'm not wanting it to seem like I'm criticizing any one person or any one thing, more so just sort of like a general feeling. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think it's more about understanding why there is this dissonance in health. Because there is all this disagreement that actually confuses the consumer. And for me, I'm not claiming to be a health expert by any means. Like, I am just a consumer who is trying to stay attuned with what's keeping me happy and healthy. So these are the messages and that I hear, and these are the ways that they're making me feel. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, it has more to do with how that message just landed on me and made me feel.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I get that. And also I'm speaking from, my client's perspective where, sometimes people will say, "Hey, Paige, I'm scared to admit this, but I ate a salad today." And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's the message you're getting from this non-diet space, is that like, there's something to be ashamed of about choosing a salad. And so sometimes I just see like people get so confused. Granted, I think people sometimes don't even read the books that they claim to like practice the philosophy. So like sometimes I think people don't really read intuitive eating. They just learn about it from social media, and then they think they're doing it. So there's a lot of sort of, it's a confusing kind of jumbled up, lots and lots of input, lots and lots of opinions, lots and lots of different ways of doing things. And again, sometimes that can leave the consumer kind of confused. So side note, it's okay to eat a salad. It's also okay to not eat a salad, right?
Yes. And it's great to eat the salad and your peanut butter cups.
Yeah.
That's actually my lunch today. So that's
Oh yeah. There you go. I don't know what my lunch is going to be. I need to think about that. Okay. So how do you feel about that conversation? Do you want to wrap anything up or kind of clarify or summarize or anything?
Hmm. No, I think we hit most of the points that we wanted to make.
Okay. Well, Monica, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Like we mentioned in the beginning, this has been a long time coming, and I'm really excited about the work you're doing. Grateful that someone's out there to to help with the messaging and to help people get clear about kind of their priorities and their values as the practitioner. And I think, if you're the clinician listening or the non clinician listening, I think all of us can benefit from sitting down, getting clear about what we care about, getting clear about maybe our 3 guiding values, like we talked about yours today. What are the listeners? What are your 3 guiding values? What do you want to kind of have your eating stem from, or your self-care stem from, or your relationships, and what's important to you? And I think that hopefully this conversation got the wheels turning for people about what they might want to consider are their values and their guiding principles of health and happiness.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this conversation. It just really allowed me to kind of reflect back on how the work that I do with both the health professionals and also in as a media platform, it allows me to create this inner dialogue of what I need to hear for myself, right? In order to stay sane in this world, we have a lot going on, right? We have work, family, whatever that is, and caring for ourselves can kind of fall to the wayside. And I'm just really grateful for having the opportunity to do this work, and it allowed me to find what those core values I wanted for my own life to guide me forward.
Love it. Well, I agree with those values. I think they're really 3 really, really important ones. And I'm excited for people to kind of dive into their own sort of practice of figuring out what this looks like for them. So thank you so much. Take a minute before we go, take a minute to talk about where people can find you and follow along and all of that.
Yeah, so you can find me on Wellseek, so that's WELLSEEK .io. And then if you want to read some of our amazing articles that we publish with the health professionals that we work with, that's wellseek.co. And of course, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Wellseek.
Yay. Okay, Monica, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to the next time we talk.
Yes, me too.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.